Hello guys and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Vijeta and today we will be discussing the French period and other periods of Chaucer's life. So last time we stopped at this only, that we have to start from the French period. So without much further ado, let us begin. So the French period expanded from 1359 to 1372. During this time, Chaucer translated the Roman de la Rose, a French poem written during the 1200s. He also wrote his Book of the Duchess, an elegant poem that shared much with contemporary French poetry of the time, but also departed from that poetry in important ways. So, Chaucer started with something relatable and then he began doing something different, like incorporating new things in a different genre. So, yeah, Chaucer's extensive reading of Latin poets such as Boethius also influenced his own work. You can see that in many of his works, the variety of his plots and the variety of characters in his works show that he has been influenced by a lot of different sources. He was influenced by French masters as Guillaume de Machaut, Jean Desmond, and Guillaume de Lorry. I am not sure if I'm pronouncing them right. So, yeah. Anyways, The Remont of the Rose, which was written in 1360. So, this book was almost a translated version of the French work Les Romans de la Rose. It was written by Jean Desmond and Guillaume de Loris, although I'm not sure. Just check it up once. The story begins with an allegorical dream in which the narrator receives advice from the god of love on gaining his lady's favor. Her love being symbolized by a rose, he is unable to get to the rose. Now, the second fragment is a satire on the mores of the time with respect to courting, religious order, and religious hypocrisy. In the second fragment, the narrator is able to kiss the rose, but then the allegorical character jealousy builds a fortress, encircling it so that the narrator does not have access to it. The third fragment of the translation takes up the poem 5,000 lines after the second fragment ends. At its beginning, the god of love is planning to attack the fortress of jealousy with his barrels. The rest of the fragment is a confession given by false semblant or false seeming, which is a treatise, I think it's treatise, on the ways in which men are false to one another, especially the clergy to their parishioners. Now, the third fragment deals with false semblant going to the fortress of jealousy in the disguise of a religious pilgrim. He speaks with wicked tongue that is holding one of the gates of the fortress and convinces him to repent of his sins. The poem ends with false semblant absolving wicked tongue of his sins. Now, the Book of the Duchess, probably the most important work of Chaucer, and it was written in 1369. This book was written on the death of the Duchess Blanche. I think it's Blanche, not Blanche. That's a little typo. Who was the wife of John of Gaunt, who was the patron of Chaucer. She belonged to Lancaster, and this book, which is written, it is an elegy and allegorical in nature. So it comprises of like 1,300 lines. In this book, Chaucer used ottava rima for the first time. Now, the Book of the Duchess begins with a man who cannot sleep. His heavy thoughts and fantasies are so disturbing that he hasn't slept for 8 years. He fears he will die of his insomnia, so he asks a servant to bring him a book to read, which he calls a romance. Romance is a medieval European genre of literature, often about knights and their adventures and romances. He says that it's better to read than to play chess to try to fall asleep. I think Magnus won't agree with that. Anyways, he reads about a fictional king, Six, who sets sail for an adventure at sea and is drowned in a storm. The queen Elséon waits for him to return, and when he doesn't, she grieves inconsolably. She begs the goddess Juno to let her see what happened to her husband, if only in a dream. She vows to give her total devotion to the goddess if she grants her wish. The goddess causes Alcyon to fall into a deep sleep and summons Morpheus, the god of sleep, to go find the king on the ocean floor, inhabit his body, and make him appear to Alcyon in a dream so that she sees that he has drowned. He does so, and Alcyon dies of grief 3 days later. The narrator or the speaker of the poem figures that if a god helps Alcyon fall asleep and dream, maybe a god would do the same for him. He sends a plea up to the gods that he will reward them with the most luxurious gold painted bedchamber, with a bed of the finest down, with covers embroidered with the finest threads of pure gold, if they will help him sleep. He immediately falls asleep and has a vivid dream. First, the narrator hears the birds singing the sweetest symphony he's ever heard. He's lying in a room whose walls have pictures of all the characters of the great European epic poems. For the entire story of Troy was wrought in the glasswork thus, of Hector and of King Priam, of Achilles and of King Lamdon, and also of Medea and of Jason, of Paris, Helen, and of Lavinia. And on all the walls were painted with fine colors the entire romance of the rose, both text and gloss. Some of the other works of this period are the ABC. It is written in 8-line stanza. The Complaint into Pity. Chaucer has used first time a 7-line stanza known as Rhyme Royal in this work. The Complaint of Mars, Queen Annelida. Now we come to the Italian period, which is probably one of his most important periods, and it gave us a lot of important works. It expanded from 1372 to 1385, and in 1372 Chaucer had been to Italy and he came in personal contact with Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio. So the important works of this period that were written by him, they were Troilus and Cresside, the Parliament of Fowls, the House of Fame, and the Legend of Good Women. I think there's a typo there, so keep that in mind. Troilus and Cresside. It is a tragic verse romance by Geoffrey Chaucer, composed in the 1380s and considered by some critics to be his finest work. The plot of this 8,239-line poem was taken largely from Giovanni Boccaccio's Il Filostrato. It recounts the love story of Troilus, son of the Trojan king Priam, and Cresside, widowed daughter of the deserter priest Calchas. The poem moves in leisurely fashion with introspection and much of what would now be called psychological insight, dominating many sections. Aided by Cresside's uncle Pandarus, Troilus and Cresside are united in love about halfway through the poem. But then she is sent to join her father in the Greek camp outside Troy. Despite her promise to return, she is loved by this Greek warrior Diomedes, and she comes to love him as well. Troilus, left in despair, is killed in the Trojan War. These events are interspersed with Boethian discussion of free will and determinism, and the direct comments of the narrator. At the end of the poem, when Troilus' soul rises into the heavens, the folly of complete immersion in sexual love is contrasted with the eternal love of God. So yeah, we have some Platonic themes going on in here. Now, the Parliament of Fowls. It was written in 1382. It is a 699-line poem in rhyme royal by Geoffrey Chaucer. It was written in around 1380 to 90, like there is this time gap. And it was composed in the tradition of French romances. This poem has been called one of the best occasional verses in the English language, often thought to commemorate the marriage of Richard II to Anne of Bohemia in 1382. It describes a conference of birds that meet to choose their mates on St. Valentine's Day. Yeah, I think I have repeated this again. These slides. I was going on for different designs, you see. So the narrator falls asleep and dreams of a beautiful garden in which nature presides over a debate between three high ranking eagles, all vying for the attentions of a beautiful female. The other birds, each of which represents a different aspect of English society, are given a chance to express their opinions. Chaucer uses this device to gently satirize the tradition of courtly love. He handles the debate with humor and deftly characterizes the various birds. So yeah, he's kind of mocking, court love and how external it is, how insincere it is, basically. Although the debate on love and marriage is never resolved, the poem is complete in itself and ends on a note of joy and satisfaction. So it's kind of like a how can I say? It's like a cheesy rom-com kind of a poem, and it's nothing very serious. It's a very light, fluffy kind of a thing. So yeah, that is something that Chaucer wrote. So you can see so much variety, so many different kinds of genres in which he tapped his pen into, and that shows what a learned man he was and how well he was able to incorporate different things that he learned from different places into his work. So moving on, we come to the House of Fame, which was written in 1380, and it was written after the influence of Dante. It has the resemblance to Dante's Divine Comedy. It is an unfinished dream poem by Chaucer. There are three books in 2158 lines of octosyllabics. After the prologue on dreams and the invocation to the god of sleep, Book 1 says the poet fell asleep and dreamt that he was in a temple of glass where he saw depicted Aeneas and Dido. And the dream moves on to deal more briefly with other parts of the Aeneid. The poet sees an eagle that alights by him and is his guide through the House of Fame. The eagle explains philosophically and at length how fame works in its arbitrary ways. The eagle departs and Chaucer enters the Palace of Fame, Rumour, where he sees the famous of both classical and biblical lore. Aeolus blows a trumpet to summon up the various celebrities who introduce themselves in categories reminiscent of the souls in Dante's Divina Commedia. Towards the end of the poem comes a vision of bearers of false tidings, shipmen, pilgrims, pardoners, and messengers, whose confusion seems to be about and to be resolved by the appearance of a man of great authority. But here the poem ends. So yeah, some words just end like that. Coming to The Legend of Good Women, which was written in 1385, I think I will end my session here. And thank you all, whoever is watching my video. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any suggestions or comments, comment box is open. And in the next lecture, we will start with The Legend of Good Women. Thank you for listening. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Please like the video if you like it. Criticisms are always welcome. Thank you all. Okay.